Genesis 2:2. By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. Hello, Inspire family, and welcome to our podcast, The Follow-Up. Today I am joined, as always, with Pastor Ernie.
How are you all doing today?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Glorious Monday morning.
Glad to have you back.
Yep. So today, if it wasn't obvious, we are talking about the Sabbath. Randy, yesterday your sermon titled Lord of the Sabbath. And you had this quote, "It is not about wrestling with who you are, but about resting in whose you are."
Yep. So the way that we approach Sabbath in our culture today is in many ways kind of the opposite of what Jesus was dealing with in the Bible text that we were reading, where the Pharisees are challenging, because the Pharisees had created this tendency to turn the Sabbath into this obligation and this work that was quite a heavy burden, and that rather than providing rest and healing for people, in its own way, it became a lot of work to observe. 39 codes as to what not to do on the Sabbath and how not to do things.
Yeah, how many steps you could take on the Sabbath, and
right.
what you could,
Exactly.
You can't pull an animal out of a ditch on Saturday. Or
Right.
What was going on here?
Right. And so we have a different kind of problem, but Jesus equally addresses that in our own way. And our problem is we tend to take it too lightly, and we tend to disconnect ourselves from the Lord. And I think that was the main thrust of the message yesterday, was that going out and bike riding with your family, though a good thing to do on the Sabbath, should not constitute the core of what you're doing on the Sabbath, because it doesn't give you the rest spiritually, emotionally, psychologically that God intends Sabbath to be. We have this tendency to feel like we have to be human doings. We have to be productive, not human beings. And we get sort of addicted in this sort of guilty way to productivity.
It's true.
And so either we escape that need by sort of distracting ourselves with leisure activities on the Sabbath, or we just give in to it, and we decide to be productive and continue to basically work on the Sabbath in one form or another, rather than slowing down and saying, I need to spend time with the one who made me, who knows me, and who can remind me that I'm loved and that I don't have to be productive all the time. And that, in fact, it's good for me not to be productive. It's part of his rhythm, right? That's why we call it a rhythmic dance, or it's a rhythmic rediscovery, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Of that we need to trust God with that productivity issue in our lives.
Yep. I think in addition to productivity, I think we need to talk about pace of life too before we delve into rest in life, because I think we orientate ourselves so much better to getting out there and getting it done and bucking up, and running. And I mean, my life has been like that. You guys, can you resonate with that? Because 99% of the audience that heard this yesterday, they're in the rat race just like we are, and it's like we don't know how to get off this wheel. How do we get off of this wheel? And don't you find that? I mean, here we are on a Monday morning after our Sabbath, which for us is to run and to minister and to do all of that. And then we show up on Monday for the podcast, and we're back at it again. So I think we should address that. Is the world too busy now?
Well, so Tim Keller had some interesting things to say about Sabbath that I found interesting, and I did not have time to get into the more specifics of how should we observe Sabbath as a people in our culture today. And he said some things that I think are really worth sharing with our audience. And so the first thing he says is we have to slow down on Sabbath and take more time. We really have to deschedule our day in many ways. We have worship, But then after that, we really need to create space in our schedule instead of just, okay, from 2 to 3, this is what we do, and then from 3 to 5, this is what we do. And we are so used to doing that now. And he's saying, no, you need to create space. And then he talks about balance. And what you do on the Sabbath is create times of inactivity in your Sabbath. The human mind, in fact, there's even actually quite a bit of research and data to back this up, that the human mind is actually more productive when it's given time to rest and to wander, basically.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like why kids, it's so great to give them free play time. It boosts their imagination and things like that. And as adults, that's no different. He talks about intentional time for contemplation. Again, and that's a good thing. Take some time to read the Word, to journal a little bit, to pray a little bit, things like that. And then he says this about activity. He says if you are going to do any activities on Sabbath, make sure they're avocational. In other words, make sure you're not doing something that you normally do to be productive. You know, so if you have a house to clean, don't clean the house on the Sabbath. And I know that's tough because if you're having guests over, got to have everything clean. And he's saying, no, resist that temptation. Don't do the laundry. If you make your living as a fisherman, don't go fishing. It's avoid things. I was telling one of our members because she was saying I was really just struggling with how do I do this. If you're considering doing something on Sabbath day that feels to you like I ought to do this, I need to do this, I just feel like I should do this, that's probably something you should resist.
Yep.
Because that's your productivity itch right there. That you gotta be productive.
What do I need to do to fulfill my Sabbath obligation?
Right. But it could be, and it's not just that, Sage. It's things related to productivity.
Yeah.
Well, it's a Sunday and it's slow. This is a good time to clean the house. Mm-hmm. No, that's not what Sabbath is for. That's not what Sabbath is for. That's what Saturday's for. Or whatever other day. Yeah. Ernie, you bring up something interesting too, which is about just the pace of life, right?
Oh man.
So Tim says this. He says that we need to learn to inject Sabbath time into our weekly work as well. In other words, find ways to actually intentionally limit our productivity itch at work. To slow down and to say, hey, I'm going to take an hour this afternoon. I'm just going to take a walk and just slow down a little bit.
You know what? And even when you do that, sometimes you feel guilty that you aren't doing anything that you deem productive. And I remember Randy and I have been friends forever. And I remember when cell phones first started making their appearance in here, and that man resisted. You resisted cell phones for a long time because of the dangers of what you thought was going to happen, and indeed are happening now that our whole life and our whole office, almost our whole being, seem to be on this little device right here that I hear this ding in the middle of the night, for goodness sakes.
Right.
When I'm trying to rest.
Right.
And it seems like we can't get away from this, and I hear reports from kids that are so sleep depraved because they go through their whole day and then they at night in their rooms and they're texting people until all hours of the morning and then listening just in case somebody is going to validate their life with a ding or a like.
That's right.
Boy, that's dangerous.
There's an intrusive tyranny of technology in our lives that if we don't have discipline, it will exhaust us. It will absolutely exhaust us, and we have to rest ourselves.
You called it Pandora's box.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's why I resisted the cell phone for as long as I did, because I knew that there was a certain Pandora's box element to that. And
I go, Randy, get one. He says, no, in that day,
I resisted Facebook for a long time, too.
Will be able to get a hold of me at any time. And that's the truth. We are, in fact, when this dings and people are looking for us, they know we have this in our hands, and they'll call us on it when we're in their presence. They say, hey, I know you had your phone on you. I tried to get a hold of you. It's like, we're at the disposal. all the time of everybody, and we can't
Yeah.
get out of this room.
Well, and this happened now with school too, with the idea that all your assignments are online and your stuff you submit. You're working hard over the whole weekend because you need to submit Saturday night at midnight or Sunday at 4,
Yep.
And just that idea of that you are constantly in communication with something.
Right. You're being impressed upon by all of these people and forces outside that, again, kind of intrude into your world. So, yeah, there's a remedy in that, and that is to be very, very intentional. That's why I mentioned Chick-fil-A and
Yes.
Hobby Lobby.
Yeah.
They've been very intentional about being countercultural.
Yep.
We're not going to be open on Sunday. We're
Yep.
going to trust the Lord with our productivity by not being open, even though our competitors are.
Yep.
And they both are doing great.
Yeah.
So there's a real lesson in there. And, when we talk about this rhythmic rediscovery, of course, it's built into creation, right, from Genesis chapter 1, right? I mean, the seventh day God rested. How much does that have to do with just, and on the seventh day you took time to rediscover joy in your life,
Oh, man.
rediscover the people in your life, rediscover just, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Discover what you created in those 6 days prior, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's okay to enjoy the fruits of that prosperity. And I think I mentioned something about that, right? That we'll enjoy our prosperity more. We'll experience it more fully if we put God first and at the center of it than if we put him aside. This is a real issue with our culture. Do you know how many parents out there are struggling with the activities that their kids are pressured to be involved in? You can't just play basketball anymore. You have to be on the traveling team. You have to be gone every Sunday, and you can't be there Wednesdays because they're going to practice. And I'm sure it's true with other activities as well. It's not just sports, but sports is probably the biggest one. There's a certain kind of cult and idolatry built around sports in our culture today, and parents feel immense pressure to give in to that. I get parents all the time, kind of say, isn't there something the church could do to help us with this, to help us not do this? And the answer is no. The Lord has already given you your remedy. Honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. Tell the coach, we won't be there on Sunday.
Absolutely.
And if enough parents do that, they won't schedule it.
I would assume part of the struggle with that too is that your kids probably want to play basketball.
Yeah. Yes,
And that's got to be one of those hard conversations, I think.
It is, and I don't want to come across as unfeeling or unsympathetic or even empathetic with parents. I've been there. Remember, I was an athlete, a high school and college athlete. I understand this. But at some point, the parent has to be the parent, and the parent has to say, it is really important that my child understands our priorities in life. And understands the true meaning of what success is. And if we don't teach them then at that age, good luck.
Tell you what, we're teaching our kids to run, but are we teaching our kids to rest? And you go, wait a minute, rest will just happen when rest takes place. And that is not exactly the truth. There's almost a discipline that goes along. What do we think God meant by rest? Why did he want that? Why did he build that into the formula?
That's a good question. So Jesus says, right, that the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath.
Yes.
So let's unpack that. What does Jesus mean when he's saying that, and in the context? Because he's responding to the Pharisees' legalistic approach to Sabbath. You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, and you can't work, and you have to light candles at this time, you have to do, and it became, right, this really burdensome thing. So he's responding to that, and then he's saying it's made for man. So let's unpack that. You two, Sage, what do you think? What's he getting at?
It's made for man. I my first inclination is to think, well, since we are not God, we are, in that sense, we are limited in actually what we can do. And so Sabbath being made for man, I mean, it is a reflection of that creation idea. So I think there's that aspect of it. But I also think that it is a day to realize that we are not God. And to say, well, God can sustain and hold all things together for all time and an eternity, and he has done it since creation. But I cannot do that. I need to step back and say, the Lord has given me these things that I get to be active in my day, but I need to recognize, but I am not actually God either.
Good thought. Yeah.
Does this come down to the kind of the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law? Because what was God's true intention with this? Because you got a lot of people at high levels arguing what is Shabbat or Sabbath. And they're arguing, hey, it's a day of the week God set aside. And then some denominations will say, okay, all of you Christians on this side, you're doing this on Sunday. When did Sunday ever become a part of this? Because Sabbath really means Saturday. Or was there an overriding spirit of this that God put out with just the need to unplug and to walk away for a little while so that, if you will, this battery that he put inside of us doesn't get so depleted it no longer has the ability to charge itself without being on a charger for an extended period of time.
Exercise theory gives us a clue, right? More and more,
yes,
trainers will emphasize the need for rest and recovery in your exercise training. That if you don't take the time to rest and recover, all of your work will be for naught. You will not experience the gains in your body if you do not take adequate time for rest and recovery, if you do not get adequate sleep, things like that. And so even the very way that we are physically made suggests that Sabbath is necessary for us, not just to rest, but to actually grow. We won't grow as people in every way probably imaginable if we don't take Sabbath, if we don't rest. The other aspect to this is often the conversation about Sabbath is individualistic, meaning when should I take my Sabbath and how should I? Well, we have to remember that Sabbath was a commandment to a community of people.
Yes.
And there's a community aspect to Sabbath, which is why when I was talking yesterday in the sermon about how many of you remember your rhythm on Sunday, and we all had the same experience. We went to church, we watched football, we watched Wild Kingdom, we watched Disney. Isn't that funny how everybody, they were all in the same boat, right?
Really
Now, I'm not saying that's what it should be. I'm just saying, isn't that interesting that we shared this community experience of Sabbath back when everything was closed? And there is something to that we need that community experience. We need to have a sense of community. We actually experience that joy better in community than if it's just about, well, I'm going to get my rest. Here's my Sabbath. Yeah. And that's what it's actually devolved down into now because of the way with Sunday openings, lots of people have to work now. So they have to find a way to get their own Sabbath, but we've lost the community part of this, which there will be a price to pay for that.
There already is. There already is. The rate of depression, skyrocket.
Right.
Anxiety disorders, and guess what? They don't only hit adults now. Do you know how many kids are medicated in the day we are? And my theory on this is they are asked to process life faster than their internal being says they can. They're going, it's like running down a sand hill as fast as you can and expecting your legs to keep up with you and not tumble. How asinine is that?
Yeah.
Well, and this is where the community aspect really plays into it, right? Because remember the statement, Sabbath is not about wrestling with who you are, but resting in whose you are. And so that community healing we experience starts with God himself and our relationship with him. But then it expands out, right? It ripples out to the community around us because we also find healing in knowing that we are loved and part of a community of people. That we are loved and appreciated, and that we can find rest in those people too. The healthiest families are the families where, for example, the kids know that they're loved regardless of their performance or their achievement. Right? But if we lose this community aspect of things, we lose that ability to rest adequately in that. So what do we do now? Well, we got to go to this tournament. Go play. And the kids want to do it, right? But they don't understand what's actually best for them. Or I've got to work this Sunday. Now, somebody asked me. We can address this quickly. How do pastors find Sabbath?
I know.
Because we work
Well,
on the Sabbath.
and that was my question. For those people who are wondering, I do work on Sunday. Well, when is the Sabbath? Or how do I find this community? Maybe.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think the horses are out of the corral. I don't think we're going to see a dramatic community change, and all of a sudden the legislature is going to reverse Sunday opening and things like that.
Right.
So we have to now ask ourselves, how can we recapture some semblance of individual and community Sabbath, given the world that we're living in? Otherwise, we're just pining for the past in a way that's going to be unproductive for us and unhealthy and unhelpful.
Yep.
So what does that look like if you have to work on a Sunday,
Like a pastor,
like we do? Yeah. How do we do that? And I would really suggest that you have to find a way to kind of capture the things that Keller talks about. Time for intentional contemplation, a day where you don't have to schedule a bunch of activities. But the biggest thing I would say is there has to be a way to do this in some form of community with people. You've got to find some, even if it's just a couple of friends that you go and have coffee with, and you just talk with, and you just process life with, and laugh with, and play a board game with, or things like that, and worship, of course. So there are people at our church, right, that don't go to worship on Sunday. They go on Wednesday night, and I don't think that's as good as Sunday, because in the sense that Sunday still, for a lot of people, you can sort of capture some community aspects and get away from work. Wednesday people, they go to work and then they come to church, and so they're having to be productive on Wednesday.
I know.
But for some, it may work better that way because of the way things are. So at least they're gaining some community time with our Wednesday worship and the meal, and and you can feel it when they're here, right? You can feel a sense of community and joy, and many people have said Wednesday nights at Inspire, it's like a midweek oasis. It's a midweek sanctuary time. Good.
That's awesome.
If they're saying that, that means they're experiencing some form of Sabbath.
They are.
Yeah.
They are, absolutely.
So we have to be appreciative of what is there.
I think we need to be mindful of our lives, our particular lives, and how rushed we are, and then actually schedule time. Schedule. If we're calendar driven, put it on the calendar. For me, right away in the morning, I have to force myself to do it, because all the cares of the day and all the people I need to see and all the appointments I'm going to have, they hit me as I'm waking up. And I have to purposefully push them out in order to have some time with God, because I know if I don't have time with God, I'll just be chasing my tail all day long. But if I can take those serene, quiet moments and say, God, this is out of my control. Help me to work out of my rest instead of rest out of my work. You know what I mean? And then go
That's
for
a
it.
super good. Write that one down. You get that, everybody out there? Say that again. That was really good.
And I rest out of, or I
work out of my rest rather
instead
than rest
of
out of my work.
rest out of my work.
That's really good.
And all it is a mind change.
You actually say something smart now and then.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm kind of a smart aleck.
That quote reminds me, or what you just said reminds me of a quote from Tim Keller. To practice Sabbath is a disciplined and faithful way to remember that you are not the one who keeps the world running, who provides for your family, not even the one who keeps work projects moving forward.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Hey, and Jesus said, "Come unto me, all you who are weary and heavily laden, and I will give you rest. Take my teaching upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly of heart." And then he says, then you will find rest for your souls. That's different than just body. That's that inner battery.
And that's what we're talking about with Sabbath. Rest for the soul.
The soul.
Leisure activities cannot do that.
No.
Distraction cannot do that. Trying to be productive on a Sunday because it's efficient will not do that.
Yep.
There is something very paradoxical and true about needing to slow down and spend time with God and entrust our productivity and our lives and our provision and our healing to Him. I think that's a good place to stop for the day.
Yep.
We're at 24:30. Folks, we went a little longer today because we began to sense in these things that there's just a little more that needs to be said. So going forward, we're probably going to shoot for around that 20 to 25 minute mark, and I can see we're at 24:40. So, Sage, do you have anything you want to close with?
We welcome your concerns. We welcome your
absolutely.
questions. Please, please, please keep working this out.
That is all for us today, Inspire family. Thank you for joining us, and God bless.